The Queen expected me to beg, I laughed, and her guards panicked. Ethan Carter had always believed that curiosity was humanity's greatest strength, and sometimes its biggest curse. Orbiting the outer edge of the Thraken Empire's territory, he piloted his small salvage ship, the Nomad, through asteroid fields that shimmered with frozen minerals. The stars around him were quiet, distant, and indifferent. Yet beneath that stillness, he knew danger was never far, especially here. The Thrakens, a proud and ancient alien species, had ruled hundreds of systems for centuries. They saw humans as fragile, naive, and amusing, creatures that could be easily toyed with. And Ethan knew that perception often led to mistakes. He had been hired, or rather, contracted, by a shadowy client to retrieve an ancient Thraken artifact from the ruins of a station orbiting a gas giant. The coordinates were precise, but the information about the station was sparse. Most of the maps had been erased from the official archives, labeled as lost to time and hazard. That was the kind of work Ethan lived for: dangerous, uncertain, thrilling. Most humans would have turned away, but he loved it. It reminded him that humans were never predictable, even when the galaxy thought they were. As the Nomad approached the station, the first sign of trouble appeared. Sensors detected energy readings far beyond anything a derelict station should produce. Lights flickered in a pattern that suggested life, or at least something mimicking life. The airlock was sealed with an intricate security system. Ethan tapped into the control panel, fingers moving quickly over the interface. He enjoyed these moments of silent concentration when his brain was fully alive with the thrill of the challenge. Within minutes, he bypassed the lock. The heavy door slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark corridor lined with alien symbols that glowed faintly. Ethan stepped inside, boots clanging softly against the metal floor. His flashlight swept over the walls. Everything looked abandoned. Dust hung in the air like tiny stars, and the silence was thick. Yet he felt eyes on him. Not literally, he hadn't seen anyone, but instinct told him this station was not as empty as it seemed. He shook off the feeling. Fear was a tool, but it was not meant to control him. Then he saw her. The alien queen appeared at the far end of the corridor. She was taller than any human had the right to be, her skin shimmering with patterns that shifted like liquid light. Her eyes were piercing, glowing faintly in the dim glow of the station. Around her, guards moved with silent precision, towering figures clad in armor that seemed to absorb the light. Ethan froze for only a heartbeat, then forced himself to step forward. His hands remained empty, showing no sign of threat, but he would not bow. He would not beg. That was not who he was. "Human," the Queen said, her voice echoing unnaturally in the corridor. "You trespass where none are allowed. Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" Her tone was a mixture of curiosity and threat, as if she were testing a theory about him before deciding his fate. Ethan smiled faintly, trying to keep the fear that threatened to creep in at bay. Most humans, most aliens even, would have fallen to their knees. They would have begged. They would have pleaded. But Ethan didn't. He had always believed that courage was not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be controlled by it. He laughed lightly at first, then louder, filling the corridor with the sound. The guards stiffened. They had been trained to react to terror to control it, but laughter, they hesitated, unsure how to respond. It was not in their protocols. The Queen's brow furrowed, the first sign of emotion she had shown. The alien had never encountered a human who laughed at the threat of death. It was unexpected. "You find this amusing?" the Queen asked, her voice colder now, but with a hint of fascination. "Do you not realize the danger you face? One misstep and you will be destroyed." Ethan shrugged casually, his grin unwavering. "I've faced worse," he said simply. "And survived?" He knew the claim was bold, but he had faced many situations where odds were against him, and humans had a tendency to survive when no one expected it. That survival instinct was something the aliens would never understand. The Queen motioned subtly with her hand. One of her guards stepped forward, a massive figure armed with energy blades. Ethan's heart rate increased, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he studied the guard, looking for a pattern, a weakness. The alien's armor was advanced, but it moved slower than its body suggested. Humans were not physically stronger, but they were unpredictable. That unpredictability had kept civilizations alive against threats that seemed unstoppable. The guard lunged, energy blades humming. Ethan rolled to the side, using the corridor walls for leverage, and grabbed a loose panel from the floor. He swung it, hitting the alien's arm, causing a loud clang. The guard stumbled, more from surprise than injury. He had expected fear, compliance, or retreat. He had not expected a human to counterattack with improvisation. Ethan seized the moment, sprinting down the corridor as the Queen observed silently. Her guards hesitated, unsure whether to chase or to obey strict protocol. That hesitation was enough. As he ran, Ethan's mind worked at lightning speed. The station was a labyrinth designed to confuse intruders, but he had studied the schematics in the brief time his ship's scanner had allowed. He knew certain emergency routes, maintenance shafts, and hidden elevators. The Queen's army was vast, but humans were clever, and humans could think in chaos. He darted into a maintenance shaft, pulling the panel back into place just as a guard rounded the corner. The metallic clang echoed, and the guard cursed in his language, frustrated that the intruder had disappeared so easily. Ethan found himself in a central chamber. Here, the artifact waited, pulsating with a strange energy. It was small, yet powerful, glowing with a light that seemed alive. He approached cautiously. The Queen's voice echoed through the chamber. "You are bold human," she said. "Do you truly believe you can claim what belongs to the Thraken Empire? Do you not fear the consequences?" Ethan looked at the artifact, then back at the shimmering figure of the Queen. "Fear is a choice," he said calmly, "and I choose not to let it control me." For a moment the Queen was silent. The guards shifted uneasily, sensing that something had changed. Humans were not supposed to act this way. They were supposed to beg, to cry, to plead. Yet here was one, defying every expectation. Ethan carefully lifted the artifact, noting its weight and energy signature. It was more dangerous than he had been led to believe, but also more incredible. This was why humans were underestimated. They thrived in unpredictability, in situations that required courage, ingenuity, and nerve. Then, alarms blared throughout the station. The Queen had triggered a protocol, and now the corridors filled with guards. Ethan glanced around, assessing his options. There was no fear in him, only focus. He darted toward a hidden exit he had spotted earlier. The guards reacted quickly, but hesitation lingered in their ranks, a ripple of doubt caused by one human who had laughed in the face of death. As he ran, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The Thraken Queen had not yet shown her full power. Her interest in him suggested that she saw potential in humans that even her species had underestimated. And that was something he would exploit. Humans had a strange, stubborn ability to turn even the direst situations to their advantage. It had kept them alive on a fragile world, surrounded by predators far stronger than themselves. It had carried them across stars, beyond the boundaries of any empire. The corridors twisted and turned, a maze meant to trap intruders. But Ethan had learned to read patterns. He ducked into a side passage, avoiding patrols, using every trick humans had developed over centuries. Improvisation, intuition, observation. The Queen's guards were efficient, lethal, but they were programmed, predictable, and above all, unready for a human mind operating in full improvisational mode. Finally, he reached the shuttle bay. He paused to catch his breath, glancing over his shoulder at the glowing corridors behind him. The Queen's shadowed figure remained, watching. He could feel her curiosity radiating like a tangible force. Humans were supposed to beg. Humans were supposed to obey. Instead, he had laughed, outwitted, and survived, and the galaxy would take notice. Ethan prepared the Nomad for departure, knowing that the Thraken Empire would soon realize that one human had defied them. One human had shown that laughter, courage, and unpredictability could unseat centuries of expectation. And he was only just beginning. With a final glance at the Queen's palace, he initiated the engines. The stars stretched into streaks of light as he jumped into hyperspace, leaving chaos behind. But even in the quiet of the cosmos, he knew the story would follow him. The galaxy would hear of the human who laughed at a queen, and the empire that had underestimated him. The stars outside the viewport of the Nomad stretched into long streaks of light as Ethan Carter maneuvered his ship through hyperspace. He let out a quiet breath, but the tension in his body did not ease. The Thraken Empire was vast, and a single encounter with their queen was enough to make even seasoned pilots wary. Yet Ethan was not afraid, not fully. His mind was alive with ideas, possibilities, and calculations. Every human instinct he had learned in years of survival whispered the same thing. The galaxy assumed humans were weak. They were wrong. The artifact rested in a containment chamber at the rear of the shuttle, humming softly. Its energy signature was alien, impossible to classify with standard human technology. Yet Ethan felt its pull, as if it were alive and aware of him. He knew it was valuable, not just for him or his shadowy client, but for the Thraken Empire. That was part of why he had to act quickly. Every second the artifact was in his possession, the Empire's attention would grow, and the Queen would not forget a human who had laughed at her authority. Ethan set the ship to a steady course toward a neutral system several light-years away. The journey would take hours, enough time to analyze the artifact, plan his next moves, and perhaps even prepare for retaliation. He tapped the control panel, bringing up scans and holographic displays. Data flowed in streams of light and code, and he watched with fascination. The artifact responded to his proximity, its energy fluctuating in complex patterns. It was not merely a tool or weapon, it was a key to something much larger. Hours passed. The hum of the ship's engine and the quiet rhythm of hyperspace filled the cabin. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his eyes, but his mind never rested. Every story he had ever heard about humans underestimated by alien species ran through his head. Every survival tale, every unexpected victory. He realized that humans had a particular advantage in situations like these, unpredictability combined with intuition. Aliens like the Thrakens relied on patterns, protocols, and discipline. Humans relied on improvisation and courage. The sudden alert of the ship's sensors snapped him to attention. A small fleet of Thraken pursuit ships had dropped out of hyperspace, intercepting him near the edge of the neutral system. They were sleek, fast, and deadly, designed to catch even the most evasive targets. Ethan's lips curved into a smile. This was exactly the challenge he had hoped for. He initiated evasive maneuvers, weaving through asteroids and debris fields that dotted the system. The Thraken ships followed, predictably, their movements coordinated and precise, but too rigid. Ethan used that rigidity to his advantage, baiting them into narrow passages where their formation broke apart. One ship collided with an asteroid, its hull rupturing in a burst of green fire. Another attempted to flank him, only to miscalculate the turn and drift into a gravitational anomaly that slowed its engines. Despite the chaos, Ethan did not panic. Humans had survived on a fragile planet surrounded by predators and disasters that required constant adaptation. Now in space, that same adaptability allowed him to survive encounters that seemed impossible. As the last pursuit ship closed in, he activated a small module from the containment chamber. It emitted a pulse of energy that interfered with Thraken sensors, creating the illusion that the Nomad had vanished. The ship systems displayed false coordinates, and the last enemy vessel hesitated, scanning for a target that no longer existed. Ethan exhaled slowly. The galaxy had underestimated humans once again, but he knew this would not be enough. The Thraken Queen would not ignore the audacity of a human who had survived her traps and escaped her fleet. He needed a plan that went beyond mere evasion. He needed leverage, a way to make the Empire respect humans not just for courage, but for intelligence. He returned to the artifact, studying its energy patterns in detail. Hours of observation revealed a startling discovery. It was not merely a device. It was a communication tool. Not for humans, not for the Thrakens, but for an older, more advanced species whose influence had shaped the galaxy in secret. The artifact pulsed differently in response to his thoughts, almost as if it recognized the uniqueness of his mind. Ethan realized that the power he held in his hands could not only challenge the Thraken Queen, but potentially change the balance of power in multiple systems. The next step, he decided, would be bold. He could not simply hide. That would play into the Thraken expectation, humans running in fear, trying to survive. Instead, he would use the artifact to send a message, a human message. He reconfigured the device with careful precision, using the ship systems to amplify and encode it. When he activated the transmission, the pulse spread not just to nearby systems, but through a network the Thrakens had failed to monitor. It carried a simple statement designed to be undeniable. Humans are clever, humans are bold, humans are not to be underestimated. Back on the Thraken side, the effect was immediate. Ships scanning for the human pilot registered the energy burst. Communications officers reported anomalies in the Empire's networks, systems that had never before been tampered with. Confusion spread from Fleet Command to the Queen's palace. Guards whispered about the audacity of one human who had escaped their control. The Queen, observing through her own sensors, raised an elegant hand. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed something new: intrigue. Meanwhile, Ethan prepared for the next stage. The neutral system had planets rich in resources and hidden caves where he could hide if necessary, but he had no intention of staying idle. Humans had always thrived when forced to act against overwhelming odds. He calculated routes, contingencies, and escape plans, each one layered with redundancy and improvisation. He was ready for the Thrakens, ready for the Queen, and ready for anything else the galaxy might throw at him. Hours later, the Nomad emerged from hyperspace near a small, uninhabited planet. Ethan landed carefully, the shuttle's engines kicking up clouds of dust that sparkled in the weak sunlight. The artifact remained secured, humming softly in the containment chamber. It was alive, unpredictable, and potentially dangerous, but it was also a reminder of the human advantage, the courage to face the unknown and the intellect to master it. Ethan stepped out of the shuttle, boots sinking into the soft soil. He surveyed the terrain, jagged cliffs, shallow rivers, and forests of alien flora. The planet was quiet, almost peaceful, yet he could sense the tension beneath the calm. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Queen was watching, calculating, and likely planning her next move. That was exactly how humans liked it. When others expected fear, humans acted with ingenuity. Over the next several days, Ethan explored the planet. He used the artifact to map energy signatures, locate hidden resources, and analyze alien technology. Each discovery reinforced a growing realization. Humans had the ability to adapt, improvise, and survive in ways that even the most disciplined alien empires could not predict. The Thrakens, despite their strength, relied on rules, logic, and authority. Humans relied on creativity, intuition, and courage. That combination, Ethan knew, could change the course of events. One evening, as twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the alien landscape, Ethan reflected on what had happened. He had laughed at a queen, escaped her guards, and evaded a fleet. He held an artifact that could challenge the balance of power, and yet he felt no arrogance. Humans had always survived through courage, but they had also survived through patience, careful observation, and understanding their opponents. That would be his next move. Suddenly, sensors alerted him to an incoming object from orbit. A small Thraken scout ship had tracked him, undetected until now. He smiled, the familiar thrill of challenge coursing through him. The humans of Earth had survived catastrophes that no other species could endure. They had learned to think, to adapt, to fight when necessary, and most importantly, to survive. Ethan activated a countermeasure device, sending false signals and decoys that made the scout believe he had landed on a different planet entirely. The alien vessel hesitated, unsure which signal to follow. In that moment, Ethan realized the truth. Humans were underestimated not because they were weak, but because they were unpredictable, adaptable, and fearless. One human, alone on a remote planet, had already outsmarted an entire empire. That night, Ethan prepared his next step. The artifact had potential far beyond simple defense. He could use it to gather intelligence, influence alien networks, and gain leverage over the Thraken Queen. But he would do it slowly, carefully, like a human always did when facing a stronger adversary. Strategy was his ally, and unpredictability his weapon. As he lay under the alien stars, watching the twin moons rise, Ethan knew one thing for certain. The galaxy had assumed humans were fragile. It had assumed they would beg, obey, and be crushed under superior strength. It had been wrong. And one day, those assumptions would cost the Thraken Empire far more than they could imagine. For now, Ethan rested, but only briefly. Humans thrived in adversity, and he was about to prove that even against the most powerful queen in the galaxy, courage, intelligence, and audacity were enough to rewrite the rules. The artifact pulsed beside him, a quiet reminder that the game had only begun. And somewhere far above, a queen watched, intrigued and perhaps a little cautious. Ethan Carter had spent the first few days on the small, uninhabited planet observing, mapping, and preparing. The artifact, resting in its containment chamber, pulsed faintly as if aware of his presence. Every time he approached it, the energy patterns shifted subtly, almost in response to his thoughts. It was unlike any technology he had ever encountered. Most humans would have been overwhelmed, fearful of the unknown power contained in such a device. Ethan, however, felt excitement. Humans had survived disasters, invasions, and endless dangers because they faced the unknown with courage, curiosity, and cunning. This artifact was another test, and he intended to master it. He began to study the artifact carefully, combining alien schematics he had gathered from the station with his own knowledge of engineering. Despite the Thraken design, the device had gaps, vulnerabilities built into its interface that only a human mind, unrestricted by Empire rules, could perceive. Ethan found that by adjusting small energy conduits within the containment chamber, he could trigger pulses that mimicked Thraken communication signals. In essence, he could make the artifact speak to their systems as if it were a Thraken device. Hours turned into a day as he refined his technique. He was not simply tinkering. He was learning, observing patterns, and experimenting with improvisation. The human's natural ability to adapt, to think creatively under pressure, gave him a clear advantage. By the end of the second day, he had the artifact configured to send encoded pulses, invisible to standard Thraken scanners, but detectable to the Empire's more advanced monitoring networks. It was a subtle but powerful leverage. On the third day, Ethan activated the first transmission. It was brief, almost imperceptible, a small ripple of energy flowing through the Empire's systems. To the Thrakens, it would appear as a minor anomaly, nothing serious. But in reality, it was a demonstration. Humans, he knew, did not have vast armies or the most advanced ships, but they had ingenuity, and ingenuity could destabilize empires if applied carefully. The first pulse had been a test. He watched the screens as data returned. The Thraken response was delayed, hesitant, showing their uncertainty. Humans had already rewritten a small piece of the Empire's network without confrontation, and the Queen would notice. The following morning, Ethan received an unexpected visitor, not in person, but through the artifact's energy network. A small probe, sent by the Thraken Queen herself, dropped into the planet's orbit. Its sensors scanned for life signs, movement, and energy fluctuations. Most humans would have panicked, thinking the Empire had finally tracked them. Ethan smiled. The probe was not a threat, it was an opportunity. He rerouted the artifact's signals, guiding the probe along a series of false readings that made it believe the planet was empty. The Thraken sensors, trained to detect normal patterns, were confused by the irregular, improvisational energy sequences emitted by the artifact. The probe reported back incomplete and conflicting data, causing delays in the Empire's response. Ethan realized that the galaxy assumed humans were predictable, but unpredictability was one of humanity's greatest strengths. As days passed, he began to experiment further. The artifact could interact with Thraken control systems, subtly overriding security protocols, unlocking doors, and redirecting minor fleets. The more he used it, the more he understood. The Thrakens relied heavily on control, rules, and order. Humans relied on ingenuity, intuition, and courage. By exploiting the Empire's reliance on strict protocol, he could accomplish what entire Thraken legions might fail to do. Then came the moment he had been waiting for. A small settlement on a nearby moon was under Thraken oversight, enforcing a colony's labor and obedience. Ethan decided to send a subtle warning, a pulse that disrupted surveillance systems and triggered minor malfunctions without causing harm. To the settlers, it appeared as a natural glitch, but the Thrakens interpreted it as a localized technical failure. Yet, even these small disruptions created hesitation among the Empire's administrators. Humans, thought to be weak and submissive, were demonstrating influence over technology the Thrakens believed was untouchable. Ethan worked relentlessly, exploring ways to expand his control. He modified the artifact to mimic Thraken command signals. A single small pulse could misdirect patrols, reroute security drones, or create minor chaos within fleets. It was not violence, yet it was immensely effective. Humans had survived millennia through intellect, adaptation, and courage, and now one human alone was demonstrating the very principles that made his species underestimated and feared. At night, as he rested beneath the twin moons of the planet, Ethan considered the Queen herself. She had watched his escape, observed his laughter, and allowed him to survive. She had expected fear, submission, begging, but humans, he thought, were not creatures of expectation. They were creatures of action. That thought alone strengthened his resolve. The Thraken queen would soon understand that even her authority could be challenged, not through armies or weapons, but through wit and ingenuity. One morning, the artifact pulsed with a new pattern. It responded to his thoughts faster, almost anticipating his intentions. Ethan realized that the device was not only a tool but a partner, recognizing the intelligence it interacted with. The idea thrilled him. Humans had always been capable of understanding and adapting to new environments faster than other species, and this artifact had chosen to interact with a human mind. That alone suggested the galaxy had underestimated what humans could achieve when faced with alien intelligence. Ethan decided to take a more aggressive approach. He planned to infiltrate a Thraken research outpost in the nearby system, using the artifact to bypass security and gather critical intelligence. This was a risk, one that humans often took and that alien species often failed to anticipate. Preparation was meticulous. He studied patrol routes, energy signatures, and communications patterns. By combining stealth, improvisation, and the artifact's unique abilities, he created a plan that no Thraken officer could predict. The approach was tense. Ethan piloted the Nomad through asteroid belts, using shadows and radiation clouds to mask his movement. The Thraken sensors were sophisticated, but they relied on predictable patterns. Humans, in contrast, thrived on improvisation. When one detection system lit up, he rerouted the ship in a completely unexpected direction, slipping past multiple layers of surveillance. By the time the Thraken outpost realized a breach had occurred, Ethan had already entered their system undetected. Inside the research station, he used the artifact to interface with Thraken databases. Its energy pulses mimicked Thraken coding, tricking systems into granting him access. Humans had always survived through adaptability, creativity, and quick thinking, and now those traits allowed him to access information that could destabilize the Empire's control. Schematics, fleet orders, and secret communications flooded his screens. He copied the data to his secure drive, careful not to trigger any alarms that could compromise the mission. Ethan paused to reflect on what he had accomplished. The Thrakens assumed humans were weak. They assumed obedience. Yet, a single human had infiltrated their systems, outmaneuvered their forces, and accessed their secrets without firing a single shot. It was a demonstration of what humans had always known. Courage combined with intelligence could overcome overwhelming odds. As he prepared to leave, an alert flashed. The Queen herself had activated a personal tracking protocol, focusing on the Nomad and its pilot. She had sensed the artifact's energy and now realized that this human was not only clever but dangerous in a way she had not anticipated. Her fleet began to mobilize, scanning the system with renewed intensity. Ethan grinned. Humans thrived on challenges, and this was the ultimate test. Back on the planet's surface, he studied the data from the outpost, analyzing fleet movements, communication patterns, and resource logistics. Each piece of information was a puzzle, a vulnerability he could exploit. The Queen had underestimated humans, assuming they would react with fear or submission. Instead, he had turned her assumptions into his advantage. Every step he took was deliberate, calculated, and unpredictable. Humans were not easy to control. Humans were a problem the galaxy had not fully understood. For the next several days, Ethan continued to test his limits. He sent encoded signals through Thraken networks, subtly disrupting operations without detection. The Empire grew frustrated, unsure how a single human could cause such widespread confusion. He infiltrated additional research facilities, copied intelligence, and studied alien strategies. Each success reinforced the truth he had always believed. Humans survived not because they were stronger or faster, but because they were inventive, adaptable, and fearless. The artifact responded to his every move, strengthening his influence over alien systems. He realized that it could become a bridge, allowing humans to interface with technology that had once been considered untouchable. If leveraged correctly, it could shift the balance of power in ways the Thrakens had never anticipated. Ethan felt the thrill of possibility. This was more than survival. This was influence, leverage, and proof that humans could rewrite the rules of engagement. One night, as he gazed at the stars through the thin atmosphere, he considered the Queen once more. She had underestimated him at every turn, assuming humans were predictable. He had proven otherwise, But this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and humans had a way of thriving where others saw weakness. Courage, intelligence, and adaptability were humanity's greatest weapons, and he intended to demonstrate them fully. Ethan prepared his next move. He would continue to challenge the Empire, expose vulnerabilities, and show that one human, using wit and ingenuity, could destabilize the strongest forces in the galaxy. The artifact pulsed in anticipation, as if it shared his resolve. Humans had always survived the impossible, and now one human was proving that even a queen could be challenged. As the twin moons set on the alien horizon, Ethan smiled. The galaxy assumed humans were fragile. It assumed fear would control them. It assumed submission was inevitable. It had been wrong. And soon the Empire would learn that a human's mind was far more dangerous than any weapon, a weapon that could change everything. Ethan Carter stood at the edge of a cliff on the alien planet, watching the faint glimmer of the Thraken fleet in the distance. His eyes narrowed, calculating every movement, every angle. The artifact pulsed at his side, alive with energy that seemed to respond to his determination. The Queen had finally realized that he was not just clever, not just bold, he was dangerous. Her fleets had begun scanning nearby systems more aggressively, and her guards were on high alert. Yet Ethan smiled. Humans thrived when the odds were against them. Fear might control many species, but humans had learned that courage, combined with wit, could turn even the most desperate situations into opportunity. The first step was to create confusion within the Empire. Ethan configured the artifact to send multiple energy pulses simultaneously, each encoded to mimic Thraken command signals. These pulses traveled through the Empire's communications network, subtly redirecting patrols, altering fleet coordinates, and creating minor chaos without triggering alarms. The Thraken officers were trained to follow protocol, but humans had always excelled at improvisation. The Queen's forces faltered in ways they could not explain, hesitation spreading from one ship to the next. Ethan's plan relied not on brute force, but on timing and unpredictability. He moved quickly, using a series of small shuttle trips and hidden transmissions to manipulate the Empire's perception. Each action seemed random, chaotic, and impossible to predict, but it was anything but. Humans had survived countless catastrophes because they could see possibilities where others saw dead ends. His choices were deliberate, each one designed to amplify the effect of the artifact while avoiding direct confrontation with the full might of the Thraken fleet. The first major test came when he targeted a small garrison on an isolated moon. The Thraken soldiers were confident, armed with the most advanced technology, and certain that a human could not infiltrate their station. Ethan smiled as he activated the artifact. Energy pulses mimicked command signals, overriding security locks and opening access points. Doors slid open, systems powered down, and drones froze mid-patrol. The garrison had no idea what was happening. Confusion spread faster than any human could move, and by the time they realized the intrusion, Ethan had already accessed critical data and disappeared into the shadows. Back at his temporary base, Ethan studied the stolen intelligence. Maps of supply routes, fleet movements, and colony defenses revealed weaknesses he had expected but needed to confirm. The Thraken Empire relied on rigid patterns and centralized control. Humans relied on observation, improvisation, and rapid adaptation. By understanding these patterns, Ethan could turn the Empire's strength into a vulnerability. Every ship misdirected, every patrol delayed, and every signal scrambled reinforced the growing realization that humans were not to be underestimated. But the Queen was not idle. From her palace in orbit around the gas giant, she watched Ethan's maneuvers unfold. Her eyes narrowed as she observed the disruption spreading through her systems. Humans were supposed to panic. Humans were supposed to obey. Yet here was one, operating with intelligence and daring that challenged everything she had known about the species. She activated elite squads, the best of her guards, instructing them to anticipate unpredictability, to think like a human. It was an unusual move, one she had rarely needed to make. Ethan anticipated the Queen's countermeasures. He had studied her strategies during his time in the artifact's presence, observing the flow of information and her reliance on direct control. Using the artifact, he created false energy signatures, drawing elite guards into ambush points he had prepared. The guards, trained to react to fear and straightforward aggression, found themselves trapped in scenarios they had not predicted. Ethan used each opportunity to gather intelligence, disable weapon systems, and sow hesitation among the Empire's forces. Every action was precise but unpredictable, human ingenuity in its purest form. The artifact's responses grew stronger. It seemed to recognize Ethan's intentions, assisting in subtle ways, rerouting power to systems he needed, opening hidden pathways and masking his presence. Humans had always survived not because they were stronger, but because they could adapt to challenges and exploit the unexpected. The Queen's forces were powerful, disciplined, and relentless, but they were designed to fight within rules. Ethan operated outside all rules, in the gray space between chaos and order, and he thrived there. The first real confrontation occurred when a Thraken fleet attempted to intercept the Nomad near a dense asteroid field. Ethan anticipated their approach and used the environment to his advantage. Asteroids tumbled unpredictably, creating shadows and obstacles that his sensors could navigate, but that the enemy could not. He guided his ship through narrow corridors between massive rocks, forcing enemy vessels to break formation. Energy pulses from the artifact scrambled their navigation systems, causing collisions and forcing some ships to retreat. The fleet was powerful, but the humans' adaptability turned the terrain itself into a weapon. Ethan's success had another effect on the Thraken soldiers themselves. Word spread of a human who could manipulate their systems without direct combat. Guards hesitated, unsure if they were seeing reality or deception. Orders were questioned, chains of command faltered, and hesitation replaced instinct. Humans had always been underestimated because they relied on intellect and courage rather than rigid discipline. Here, Ethan demonstrated that unpredictability could be more dangerous than firepower. As the chaos unfolded, Ethan prepared for his next bold move, a direct challenge to the Queen herself. She had grown intrigued by him, no longer seeing him as a simple trespasser but as an anomaly, a test of her authority. He could have avoided her, remained hidden, and continued his operations from afar. But humans thrived when taking risks, when confronting challenges directly, and when asserting themselves against superior forces. The Queen expected fear. She expected submission. Ethan had laughed at both. Now he intended to show her the full extent of human audacity. Using the artifact, he disrupted the security systems within the Queen's palace. Guards who had once been perfectly synchronized stumbled and froze, unsure of the signals they were receiving. Doors opened where they should have remained closed. Communication links displayed conflicting instructions. Confusion spread faster than a weapon could fire. Ethan moved through the corridors with deliberate caution, observing and exploiting every hesitation. The Queen's guards were formidable, but they were human unready. Every hesitation was an opportunity, and every opportunity was a step closer to confronting the Queen. When he finally reached the central chamber, he found the Queen observing him from a balcony above. Her expression was a mixture of surprise, frustration, and curiosity. Ethan looked up at her and without fear spoke. "You expected obedience," he said. "You expected fear, you assumed humans would beg, you were wrong." The Queen's eyes narrowed, studying him. "And what do you expect now, human?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. "Do you think you can challenge the Thraken Empire alone?" Ethan smiled faintly. "I don't need to fight alone," he said. "Humans survive by adapting, improvising, and taking advantage of what others cannot predict. I've done that. And I've shown that even the mightiest empire can hesitate." Her guards shifted uneasily, sensing the change in authority. They had been trained to enforce fear, but fear was no longer a reliable weapon against him. Ethan moved closer, using the artifact to trigger subtle failures in defensive systems. Energy barriers flickered, surveillance drones misread his movements, and security systems displayed conflicting data. The Queen's authority was strong, but her empire relied on obedience and discipline. Ethan relied on adaptability and creativity. The tension in the room was palpable. Guards glanced at one another, unsure whether to follow protocol or react to the chaos around them. The Queen's presence was commanding, but Ethan's audacity had disrupted the predictability she depended on. He stepped forward, confident, aware that every choice he made further destabilized the order of her forces. Humans had always relied on thinking when others followed rules blindly. Now that principle was being demonstrated in full. For a long moment, the chamber was silent except for the faint hum of the artifact. Ethan's gaze met the Queen's. He had no weapons drawn, no shields activated, yet he radiated confidence. Humans had survived countless threats through intellect, courage, and improvisation. He embodied those traits fully. Finally, the Queen spoke. "You are clever," she said, her tone a mixture of warning and fascination. "But cleverness alone will not save you." Ethan responded without hesitation. "Perhaps not, but courage, intelligence, and unpredictability, those have saved humans countless times, and they've just begun." The Queen studied him, the first hint of respect flickering in her gaze. She had underestimated humans, and now she faced the reality that one human could manipulate her forces, infiltrate her networks, and confront her directly without weapons. Humans were more than their size, strength, or technology. They were audacious, inventive, and unstoppable when cornered. Ethan prepared his exit. He had proven his point. Humans could challenge the Thraken Empire not through strength, but through ingenuity. The artifact had amplified that potential, allowing him to influence systems, misdirect forces, and demonstrate audacity. His presence alone had caused hesitation, fear, and uncertainty among the Queen's guards. Humans, thought to be weak, had shown the power of adaptability, courage, and intellect. As he retreated from the chamber, he left behind a simple message encoded in the palace systems. Humans are not to be underestimated. The Queen would find it eventually, and when she did, the Empire would know the truth. Ethan moved through the corridors with careful precision, using the artifact to mask his movements and redirect security protocols. The Queen's forces were powerful, but they were rigid. He was fluid, adaptable, and unpredictable. That was enough. Back at his shuttle, Ethan prepared for the next phase. The artifact pulsed with energy, responding to his determination. Humans thrived in adversity, and he had created more than chaos. He had created opportunity. The Thraken Queen had seen a glimpse of what humans could achieve when underestimated. The Empire had felt the first ripple of disruption, and more would follow. As the Nomad lifted off the planet's surface, Ethan looked back at the palace. He had not destroyed it. He had not fired a weapon. He had demonstrated a truth the galaxy had ignored. Humans were resourceful, unpredictable, and fearless. And one human alone had challenged the might of the Thraken Empire. Ethan smiled as he entered hyperspace. The galaxy had assumed humans were weak. They had assumed obedience and fear would control them. They had been wrong. And now, the Thraken Queen, along with her empire, would have to reckon with that reality. Ethan Carter piloted the Nomad through hyperspace, his mind alive with calculations, possibilities, and strategies. The artifact hummed at the back of the shuttle, its energy pulsing rhythmically as if aware that the final act was approaching. The Thraken Empire had already begun to realize that humans were more dangerous than they had ever assumed. Hesitation, confusion, and fear had spread through their fleets. Their guards no longer moved with perfect precision. Even the Queen, the most disciplined and commanding mind in the galaxy, had started to doubt the Empire's assumptions. Humans, thought fragile and submissive, had proven unpredictable, resourceful, and unstoppable when pressed. Ethan knew that this was the moment to take the next step. The target was clear, the Thraken Queen herself. She ruled from a palace station orbiting a massive gas giant, her authority absolute. Her fleets were formidable and her guards legendary for loyalty and skill. Most humans would have fled, hidden, or submitted. Ethan had already proved that fear would not control him. Now he intended to show the full strength of human ingenuity. Survival alone was not enough. Influence, leverage, and audacity were required. Humans thrived on challenges, and this was the ultimate one. As the Nomad approached the palace station, Ethan activated the artifact, sending subtle pulses into the Empire's network. The signals mimicked Thraken command sequences but carried hidden instructions. Patrol ships misread coordinates, defensive drones stalled, and internal alarms flickered without reason. Chaos spread quietly through the station, just enough to distract the guards and create openings without triggering full-scale alert. Humans had always survived by finding advantage in the unexpected, and this was a perfect example. Ethan docked the shuttle at a maintenance bay near the station's core. He moved quickly, confident but cautious, the artifact shielding him from detection and manipulating security protocols. Doors opened at the right time, surveillance cameras malfunctioned, and guards were rerouted without understanding why. One of the Thraken officers, a massive armored figure, paused, uncertain whether to follow orders or investigate the conflicting signals. Humans thrived on intuition and improvisation, and Ethan used both to full effect. He entered the main chamber of the station, a vast hall filled with glowing alien glyphs and floating light conduits. At the far end, on a raised platform, stood the Queen herself. Her form was tall, regal, and intimidating, her armor shimmering with energy that reflected the room's glow. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, studied him as though measuring every thought. She had prepared for fear, submission, and regret, but Ethan brought none of those. He had laughed at her before, and now he stood ready to challenge her directly, using intellect instead of weapons. "You continue to defy reason, human," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. "Do you not fear what you face? One wrong move and your life will end instantly." Ethan smiled faintly. "I do not fear," he said. "Humans survive by thinking when others follow rules blindly. I've done more than survive. I've shown you that your empire can hesitate." The Queen's eyes narrowed. She had underestimated humans, and now her forces had been disrupted, her authority challenged, and her systems manipulated, all without a single human weapon fired. Ethan's confidence, combined with the artifact's abilities, had created chaos that she could not predict. For the first time, she faced an opponent she could not control. With a flick of his wrist, Ethan activated the artifact, sending energy pulses through the station. Guards froze mid-step, automated defenses deactivated, and communication channels became unreliable. The Queen's elite squad, trained to handle unpredictable situations, found themselves caught in contradictions, unsure how to react. Humans, thought weak and fragile, had turned adaptability and courage into weapons more powerful than lasers or shields. Ethan moved forward calmly, deliberately, observing every hesitation in the Queen's guards. Their fear was not of weapons, it was of uncertainty. Humans had survived because they could act in chaos, while other species relied on order. Every misstep of the Thraken forces reinforced the truth Ethan wanted to show. A single human, armed with intelligence, audacity, and ingenuity, could change the course of events in an empire. The Queen raised her hand, energy flaring from her armor in a warning. "Do you truly believe your mind is enough to challenge me, human?" she asked. Ethan stepped closer. "Not my mind alone," he replied. "The strength of humans comes from courage, creativity, and the refusal to be controlled. I've survived where others would have failed. I've outsmarted your fleets, I've infiltrated your systems, and now you see what humans are capable of when underestimated." The Queen studied him, tension tightening her posture. Her guards shifted uneasily, sensing the change in control. Ethan activated the artifact once more, creating subtle diversions that left the Queen momentarily exposed. The hall's energy conduits flickered, lights danced unpredictably, and automated drones misfired harmlessly in multiple directions. Chaos had been created, but no lives were lost. Humans were proving strength without unnecessary violence. "You are audacious," the Queen said, her voice carrying both warning and curiosity. "Few have ever faced me like this." Ethan smiled. "Audacity is human nature," he said. "And it works." He moved to the center of the chamber, the artifact humming at his side. Energy flowed through it, interacting with the station systems, subtly asserting control over areas the Queen had assumed unbreachable. Her guards hesitated, unsure whether to obey her commands or follow the new, conflicting signals. Humans had survived by exploiting hesitation, by thinking faster and acting differently than any opponent could anticipate. This was the essence of their strength. Ethan continued to advance, and the Queen made a choice. She signaled her elite guards to engage, but even they faltered under the combined confusion of the artifact and human improvisation. Doors closed behind them, automated barriers shifted unpredictably, and energy fields flickered. The humans' ingenuity had turned the station itself into an obstacle disrupting order without violence. Finally, Ethan stopped a few meters from the Queen. He looked up at her, calm and confident. "This is not about destruction," he said. "This is about respect. Humans are not fragile. We are unpredictable, clever, and resilient. You assumed we would beg. You assumed fear would control us, and you were wrong." The Queen's eyes narrowed, and for the first time her regal composure showed uncertainty. The chaos around her guards, the failures of systems she had assumed unbreakable, and the confidence of one human had made her reconsider. Humans, she realized, were not bound by fear or expectation. They were dangerous precisely because they acted in ways others could not anticipate. Ethan activated the artifact's final sequence. Energy pulses radiated outward, temporarily disrupting communications, security, and surveillance across the palace station. The Queen's fleet would take hours to fully respond. Her guards were disoriented, unsure where threats might arise. Ethan had not destroyed the Empire, but he had shown its vulnerability, and he had done so without taking lives. Humans thrived because they could act creatively in chaos. Humans survived because they refused to obey assumptions. Humans prevailed because they could turn the unexpected into an advantage. For a long moment, the chamber was silent. The Queen's posture shifted from anger to calculation. Ethan had proven the point that one human, alone, could challenge her authority. She had assumed obedience, fear, and fragility. Instead, she had encountered intelligence, courage, and audacity. Finally, she spoke. "You have proven your point," she said. "Humans are unpredictable, clever, dangerous in ways I did not anticipate." Ethan nodded. "We are," he said, "and we will be even more so when the galaxy assumes otherwise." The Queen considered him. Her empire had relied on strict order, discipline, and control. One human had disrupted that system without weapons, without violence, and without surrender. It was a demonstration of what humans had always understood. Strength comes not from power alone, but from courage, intelligence, and creativity. Ethan moved back toward the shuttle. He had accomplished what he came to do. The Thraken Empire had seen the true potential of humanity. The artifact had amplified that power, allowing one human to influence systems, fleets, and personnel far beyond his physical capabilities. The galaxy had assumed humans were weak. It had assumed fear and submission would control them. Both assumptions had been shattered. As the Nomad lifted off the planet and entered hyperspace, Ethan reflected on the events. He had laughed at a queen, outsmarted her forces, and survived against overwhelming odds. He had used intellect, courage, and audacity to demonstrate humanity's true strength. The Thraken Empire would now know that humans were unpredictable, resourceful, and resilient, capable of survival and influence far beyond what others had imagined. The artifact pulsed at his side, its energy steady and responsive. Humans had always survived the impossible, and now one human had proven that audacity, intelligence, and courage could challenge even the most powerful queen in the galaxy. The galaxy would remember this human not as weak, not as fragile, but as a symbol of human ingenuity and daring. Ethan smiled as he charted a course for the next system. The Thraken Queen had learned a lesson she would not forget, and her empire would reconsider its assumptions about humans. One human had laughed at fear, challenged authority, and survived. That laughter, that defiance would echo across the stars. The stars streaked past the shuttle as Ethan prepared for the next adventure. Humans had always faced impossible odds, survived, and triumphed in ways others could not predict. This was just the beginning. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would be remembered forever.